We are recording this session and can make the recording available to those who are interested. To obtain a link to the recording, please email our inbox at fpac.bc.press@usda.gov after the conclusion of the call, and I will include that email address in our meeting chat. So welcome to this media roundtable on additional assistance that will be available for certain producers through the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program. We just want to remind you that this information and the press release is embargoed until 10 a.m. Eastern tomorrow, January 15th. Today, you'll hear from Farm Production and Conservation Undersecretary Bill Northey and Farm Service Agency Administrator Richard Fordyce. Farm Service Agency Assistant Deputy Administrator for Farm Programs Brad Carmen will also be available to answer any questions. I'd like to ask Undersecretary Northey to kick things off for us.
Very good. Thank you, Dana. Appreciate it very much. And thanks all for joining this afternoon. And glad to be able to share some news with you. So for a few more days, I'm Undersecretary Bill Northey at FPAC. And what a crazy year we've all been through. You just did your year-end stories that certainly talked about the year we've been through and the impact of coronavirus, and it's still out there impacting folks. You remember as the CARES Act passed back in, or got signed, I think, end of March, we stood up a program that sign-up started at the end of May, our first coronavirus food assistance program. We then introduced, we added a lot of commodities to that program and then introduced a CFAP 2 as well this last fall. And as we've done this, we've all looked to figure out along the way, are there additional things that we should be trying to do to be able to support our producers, ways that the rules could work better. Certainly in CFAP 1, we actually had a notice of funds availability and added additional commodities. We looked to even up some of the rules that weren't as effective in CFAP 1 when we stood up CFAP 2 as well. And so we've had a lot of conversation with stakeholders, our folks in the field as well. Our county staff has shared things that have worked or not worked for them, and that led us to continuing to look for ways that we could find to be able to support producers. We did have a few dollars available from our CFAP 1, 2, and Richard will talk through some more of those pieces, I believe, but as we looked at what we could do all along, think that we might see some additional coronavirus support well before we did at the end of the year. So Dana mentioned these rules will be available tomorrow. So we're running a press release tomorrow at 10 a.m. They'll go on public display at 8:45, and they'll actually be printed or published on Tuesday, January 19th. So we wanted to give you a heads up so that you could prepare for that, but obviously we need to be able to hold tight in the information until it actually does go live. So what this will include top-up payments for swine from CFAP 1. In CFAP 1, we look to cover in inventory payments. Part of the loss, we're increasing the amount that we're covering there. And again, Richard will give some more details as we go along here. It'll include assistance for contract growers. Certainly heard that from folks. We're limited in being able to use CCC money for that, so we were able to tap into some of the CARES money that was available for us to look at that, and then match it as well with some criteria that was a part of the omnibus legislation that passed in December 2. We're adding 2 additional commodities for CFAP 2 for the sales commodities. This is pullets, so growing birds getting ready to be layers, as well as turf grass sod. And we did a little research to understand how they were impacted and agree that they should be eligible in the sales category too. And then we had calculating the sales commodities. We looked at, in some cases, we had some producers with production losses, but they received insurance or other payments, and we're allowing those payments to be included in their revenue for 2019, because that certainly was likely normal revenue, or certainly to replace some of the lost revenue that they had if they had a production loss. And then lastly, we had a piece where we had an issue with actual production history for some of our producers. If you're an individual and you have production history, we use that number. In some cases, some of our producers didn't have that, and so we're adjusting the way we're using county yields for those cases. So as this came together, we had rules in process we're working on. We've done a lot of the math, and we have things in process. You know that it's a long process. You put pieces together, you do economic analysis. It needs to go to OMB and interagency clearance and other things. And then Congress passed the Consolidated Appropriations Act in December, and that was signed in December. And so we then had to look at, do we need to adjust based on that? And so there were a couple different things that were part of that act that we're including here. One of those is contract growers. That was mentioned there. We were working on some pieces that's included in this. We were able to make sure that that was included. The other thing that was mentioned in that act was allowing WHIP payments, WHIP plus payments. So if somebody had a WHIP plus payment because they had a production loss in 2019, then that can count as revenue for a sales-based crop. It would not affect corn and soybean producers because they get a payment in a different mechanism. But if you're a sales-based crop and you lost those revenue and it was replaced in some part by WHIP plus payments, I mentioned crop insurance and NAP as well, but the WHIP plus provisions were in that Consolidated Appropriations Act. So we were able to put those in consistent with that act. We also have done some work to look at some of the other things that were in that act to be able to tee it up so that next administration can be able to quickly put those pieces into place. Certainly the mandatory crop payments, the cattle payments have quite a nice little formula to them and pretty well broken out, as well as the dairy margin coverage provisions. And those will be things that can get stood up fairly quickly, but we're not such that we could announce them today and have them ready to go. And then there's some provisions there that'll take longer. Certainly the depopulation provisions will take work to figure out exactly what the mechanism is, and the reporting mechanism is, and how you base those payments. Is it based on one payment rate or weekly payment rates, or how do you do that? And so those provisions, there's some more policy decisions that'll need to take place, and that'll probably take a little longer. And then finally, there's some discretionary provisions as well that will need some guidance on what the intention is to support those discretionary provisions or not. We are not addressing those in this case. So the applications for those that are required to have applications here, if they have expanded ability, I mentioned turf grass, contract growers, those applications, the sign up will begin on Tuesday the 19th, next week, through February 26th. The swine top-up payments will be based on an inventory that we received in that first CFAP 1. So swine producers do not need to have a sign up or come into the office to sign up. We already have the information from that original sign up that they gave, and we're able to provide those top-up payments. So I'm going to turn it over to Richard Fordyce to give you more of the details of the program. Richard.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Undersecretary Northey, for kind of laying the groundwork on the announcement here today. Kind of like the Undersecretary, I'm the administrator of Farm Service Agency for a few more days, and it's really an honor and a thrill to be able to visit with you a little bit about the provisions in the announcement that we're visiting with you today. So first, let's talk about the CFAP 1 top-up payments for swine, and the Undersecretary talked through that a little bit. Here are maybe a few more specific details. For CFAP 1, the swine inventory payment rate was set at 25% of the estimated total economic loss, and you know, we came by those numbers through the Office of the Chief Economist and some other resources. And the CARES Act funding is being used to increase that 25% of the estimated loss to 50%. So we knew the losses were greater than we were able to pay for in CFAP 1, and so this is an opportunity to top those up a little bit. And as the Undersecretary said, payments are based on hog and pig inventory owned between April 16th and May 14th. So that inventory number from CFAP 1, and that is multiplied by a payment rate of $17 per head. And again, as mentioned earlier, there is no action necessary on the part of the producer. The payments will automatically be reported and based on that inventory of their CFAP 1 application. So they do not need to apply. They don't need to reapply. They don't need to go into the office to do that. Again, the Undersecretary did mention, when we talk about CFAP 1 and that livestock inventory number, cattle were in that inventory number as well. But the cattle will be addressed under the formulas that were in the Act in the weeks ahead. So a new one, let's talk about the CFAP 2 assistance for contract growers of livestock. Contract livestock producers are those who raised broilers, pullets, layers, chicken eggs, turkeys, hogs, or pigs under a contract in 2019 and 2020. Producers must demonstrate a drop in revenue for the period from January 1st through December 27th, 2020, as compared to the period from January 1, 2019 through December 27th, 2019. So you may be wondering how we came up with that last date, December 27th, and that is the date that the Act was signed. And so that's the date that we have to use in this segment of the assistance. And we're going to multiply that by 80%. So producers will be able to apply again between January 19th and February 26th of 2021. And that's going to be pretty consistent as we get through and talk about these categories, that application time period. And then the Undersecretary mentioned earlier, pullets and turf grass have been added as new CFAP 2 sales-based commodities. These two commodities experienced COVID-19 market disruptions, but had not been explicitly included in the initial CFAP 2 rule. And we heard from industry sources and others that these products suffered similar COVID-19 disruptions as some of the other eligible products, and so we did run that to ground, and we're able to determine that there were losses there. Payments are based on eligible sales in 2019. And the new provision adds crop insurance indemnities, NAP, and WHIP Plus payments for crop year 2019. Producers will be able to apply or modify those existing CFAP 2 applications, again, those same dates, January 19th through February 26th. FSA has also adjusted the CFAP 2 sales commodities calculation to take into account those crop insurance indemnities and payments received through NAP and WHIP Plus to more accurately reflect or represent what a producer would have marketed if not for having a cause of loss. So this goes into what that revenue is. So we're able to add those as well. Producers will now use the producer's eligible sales in calendar year 2019, plus those indemnities, crop insurance indemnities, NAP payments or WHIP Plus payments for the 2019 crop year, multiplied by the applicable payment rate, whatever that payment rate was for that commodity. Sales for those levels of revenue. Sales commodities include specialty crops, and this is a reminder, specialty crops, aquaculture, tobacco, specialty livestock, nursery crops, and floriculture. Producers who had a 2019 crop year loss will now be able to modify an existing CFAP 2 application, again, through those dates, January 19th through February 26th. And lastly, FSA has updated the CFAP 2 calculation for price trigger crops to treat all producers with crop insurance more equitably, regardless of whether actual production history or an APH is available. And so we heard from stakeholders that there are crop insurance products. These folks have crop insurance. So one example would be area policies that don't have a readily available APH. And so what we were doing in those cases was using the Ark County benchmark yield and multiplying that by 85% to obtain a 2020 APH or an APH approved yield. So we're going to be able to, for those folks that have purchased crop insurance, they have crop insurance, they're just different types of products. We're going to take that Ark County benchmark yield and apply a factor of 100%. So we're increasing that. Some of the folks, the eligible producers, would include those that produce barley, corn, sorghum, soybeans, sunflowers, upland cotton, and all classes of wheat. This change is intended to treat producers with crop insurance coverage, but without that available 2020 APH in the way that we've been treating with producers with other products in crop insurance. Again, those eligible producers will be able to modify an existing CFAP application between those dates, January 19th to February 26th. All of these details will be available starting tomorrow on farmers.gov/CFAP. Farmers.gov/CFAP. Producers should submit a new CFAP 2 application or modify an existing application by contacting the FSA office at their local USDA service center. Producers who are submitting new applications have the additional option of creating an application through our online CFAP 2 application portal. And that, again, that's for producers that are initiating a new application, not the ones that are amending one. All USDA service centers are open, including those that are restricting in-person visits or that require appointments. You know, our folks, and we've gone through this now several months in different phases, but our folks continue to work with our producers and have been doing a really good job of it, by the way, a lot of times by phone and by email and by using some other online tools that we have brought into as some of our resources. Additionally, and I know in the past we've talked about our call center, but the call center will be up where producers can get one-on-one support, talking to FSA employees, and that number of the call at the call center is 877-508-8364. So all application details, including the application form, additional materials, and access to the CFAP2 application portal will be available on Tuesday, the date of sign up, when sign up begins, will be available on Tuesday, January 19th. And this is at farmers.gov/CFAP2/apply. farmers.gov/CFAP2/apply. And I think I'll turn it back over to Dana.
Thank you, Undersecretary Northey and Administrator Fordyce. All right, now we can take some questions. To ask a question, please click to raise your hand in Microsoft Teams. I'll call on you in the order that you raise your hand. Then please unmute yourself and state your name, affiliation, question, and who you'd like to direct the question to. You may also submit your question using the chat feature. Please be sure to include all that same information, your name, affiliation, question, and who you would like to address the question. If there are any questions that we can't get to, or if you want to get additional background on the topic, our public affairs team is happy to assist. You can reach us at fpac.bc.press@usda.gov, and I included that in our meeting chat. So let's get to it. Let's go to Phil Brasher. Go ahead.
Yes, Philip Brasher, the Agri-Pulse, having some trouble getting unmuted. Thanks for doing this call, Richard and Bill. Two questions. Well, one of them is kind of a request. If this is going to go on public display at 8:45, then we're going to have the information available at 8:45, but won't have what you're providing on this call in terms of explanation until 10 o'clock. I would ask that you consider making the embargo 8:45. And my question is, could you clarify the source of funding for these additional payments? Is any of this coming from the $13 billion provided in the omnibus, or is this from your existing CCC authority, or from residual CARES Act funds?
So it'll be from CARES Act, residual CARES Act, and some residual CCC as well, mostly from CFAP1, where we had about between 10 and $11 billion spent out of 16 billion that we set aside to be able to fund that CFAP1. CFAP2 was, I think our target was 13.5 or 14 billion, and we're a little over 13 billion of dollars out the door, with still some applications that are getting I's dotted and T's crossed. So there's not much money left there. So I think, and I'm going to look at Richard too, I believe this is all that CFAP1 and CFAP2 money. None of this is actually tapping the omnibus money that passed in December.
I think I would agree, Undersecretary. I think you're spot on.
Mr. Undersecretary, Brad Carmen, I can amplify that a little bit. Okay. So the CARES funding are for the $17 that we spoke about for swine, and the 80% on the contract growers. That's all CARES funding. And then we have some CC funding on the smaller ones, basically where we talked about adjusting the application on the APH, adding pullets, adding WIP payments. That's the CCC funding. So there's two sources, either CARES or CCC, but none of it is from the consolidated approach.
Okay, we had a question from Rhiannon Branch from Brownfield Ag News for Undersecretary Northey that came in through the chat. Her first question is, these are just provisions to CFAP 1 and CFAP 2, correct? Can we expect the new administration to roll out a CFAP 3, or will they just continue to revise 1 and 2? So we'll start with that first question.
So that's a good question, probably best asked to them. I don't know what the terminology will be. We call this, internally, we've been calling this CFAP additional. This is some additional to CFAP 1 and CFAP 2. So certainly the dollars here are much smaller than the dollars that were in CFAP 1 and CFAP 2. There are some big provisions there to come from that consolidated budget omnibus. When you look at the acre payments, the $20 an acre payments, that is likely between $4.5 and $5 billion. There's cattle payments in there as well, and I don't know what future terminology will be, but for us it made sense to call this an adjustment to CFAP 1 and CFAP 2.
Okay, and the second question, can you clarify who needs to apply and reapply and who does not?
Yeah, and Richard, you want to hit that again? That's absolutely great question.
Sure. So I think there's really maybe three categories. So the swine additional payment that we're pulling the inventory numbers from CFAP 1. Those folks don't need to reapply. Frankly, they don't need to do anything. We have those inventory numbers, and so our local staff there in the Farm Service Agency office and our county committees will make sure that those payments are made and go to the right folks. The new ones, so contract growers, I think if you think about adding in the sales commodities, the pullets and the turf grass, they're going to need to create an application. They're going to have an application, and then something that maybe needs to be amended. So if a producer, for example, had applied and we utilized the 85% of the Ark County benchmark rate, and they truly did have an insurance product, and we're going to move that from 85% to 100% of that Ark County benchmark yield, then that requires an amendment and I don't know what the right word is, amended application or edited application. So there's kind of three different buckets, but the ones that we know will not have to do anything are those top up or additional payments to the swine producers from CFAP 1.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat. Phil, I see your hand is still raised. Oh, never mind. Just wanted, okay, do you have another question, Phil, for us?
Yes, I do. Do you have
okay.
the estimated cost on these provisions?
Good question. I did pull that here, and our estimates, and some of that will be laid out then in the cost benefit analysis that will be part of that role, but about $150 million for the swine top up, $100 million for turf grass, about $30 million for the crop insurance included in sales revenue, $20 million in the insurance policies, of being able to use the APHs. And then the big one that I left out, which is a real question mark to us. It's a real challenge to come up with a number, and that's contract growers. But very little information where we've been able to come up with the actual amount of contract payments that are out there, and then the number of producers that didn't receive them. And so we have, in the cost benefit analysis, you'll see it's up to almost $2 billion Certainly a lot of estimates would be much less than that in the total amount. And in the Consolidated Budget Act, they have said to spend up to $1 billion. We don't have that same limitation. We don't know what that number will be, but it could be that much if the cost benefit analysis is correct.
And could I follow up? My understanding was that previously you said you could not compensate contract growers, that they had to own the animals, the poultry, livestock. What's changed? Is that based on the authority in the omnibus?
It's actually based on the CARES. The CARES Act provided some real flexibility, but we were needing to have the CARES Act available for the money that we thought we could spend from CFAP 1. If we were to use CCC in any of these, or to get new CCC money, we would not be able to have that authority. Certainly the omnibus gives that authority as well, but it's a different pool of money. We're spending this out of the CARES Act, which provided a lot more flexibility. Without dipping back into that, we would not have the authority to be able to do that.
I'd just like to clarify, we had authority to pay the contract growers. At the time we first implemented CFAP, we didn't have enough information. We certainly got more information from the contract growers now. That's why we've included them here.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. Not seeing any more questions in the chat. Does anybody else want to address through the audio line? Okay, and if you think of anything and you need some additional information or background, just go ahead and shoot us an email to that FPAC Business Center Press inbox email address that you can find in your chat box. Okay, seeing that we have no more questions, we will go ahead and conclude today's roundtable. But before we do, I'll turn it back over to Undersecretary Northey for any closing remarks. Undersecretary Northey.
Thank you, Dana. Appreciate it. Again, thanks everybody for joining. We will look right now. We are embargoed until 10 a.m. If something changed, you'll all see it. I understand your point, Phil. But again, thank you for joining. Thank you for sharing information with our producers out there. We know our regular rules can be complicated enough. And then we have our ad hocs as well that by necessity need to be constructed differently. And it's really important to be able to get that word out to producers. And you are just wonderful partners in making that all happen. Richard said we will both be leaving our roles soon. We'll be replaced by, no doubt, next round of really great people. We have a wonderful career staff that will keep working. Sign up for CRP continues. These signups will start and will continue. There's all kinds of good folks here, and they will continue to answer your questions as you have them as well. Certainly from our perspective, it's been a real pleasure to be able to work with our teams here at USDA, to work with all of you, to be able to get out to producers, to be able to feel like we got a few things done that helped a few folks out there. Never claiming any of it was perfect, but we tried to be as straightforward as we could, as simple as we could for busy producers, but also as timely as we could get them out as well. And that was very important to us as well. So again, thank you for sharing the news with folks out there. I appreciate you being able to follow along, and look forward to our next conversation, wherever and whenever that is. Thank you all.
Thank you for joining us, and have a great day.